cannot believe what James Worthy did to get thrown in jail. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about the Los Angeles Lakers legend, James Worthy. Worthy was caught up in a few unfortunate situations and was poorly influenced by the players on the roster around that time, causing him to do a few things that people never could have imagined, including one truly embarrassing story in particular that we're going to start off with. James Worthy found himself in the headlines for all the wrong reasons on multiple occasions. Like one time, the legendary Lakers forward had grown bored right before a game in Houston in 1990. He didn't really know what to do with himself, so he went and solicited multiple prostitutes to try and fight that boredom as best he could. The funny part about those prostitutes is that they weren't even prostitutes at all, rather undercover police officers that ended up busting him for his actions. They even threw Worthy in jail for about half a day before he got released on a $500 bail right before the game between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Houston Rockets. Worthy didn't even make it to the arena before the game first began, actually arriving in the second quarter and receiving huge cheers from the fans in the arena. I guess they didn't care too much about the whole prostitute thing. By the time the game was all wrapped up, he'd pitched in 24 points for his team in the Lakers' overtime victory over the Rockets. Worthy's wife Angela didn't find the entire situation amusing though, and actually left James completely. She mentioned how she didn't want her daughters to believe that what James did was the correct way to treat a female. So she left and even began writing her own book that talks about women's empowerment. It was surprisingly very good. With all of that, I'm sure that Worthy was able to find some excitement in his day after being so bored earlier. Worthy has found himself in the ire of fellow NBA players even after he officially retired from the league. Back in the days that saw Kevin Durant switch teams and head over to the Golden State Warriors, Worthy had caught up with KD and shared a few words with him. Worthy told him to continue playing his game and to just tune out all the noise because people change jobs every single day, so there's no reason to worry about what everyone is saying about you. Durant initially said that his statements were truly nice, and he felt good about meeting a legend like Worthy, but that didn't last very long. One of Durant's closest friends heard the nice things that Worthy said about him and looked utterly shocked. He told Durant that Worthy had been ripping him up on social media the entire night during the game, making fun of the exact same thing that he told Durant not to worry about, saying stuff along the lines of, "Magic wouldn't have done that," or "I wouldn't have done that." This isn't the first time that we've seen a situation just like this, but it definitely isn't a good look for a Lakers legend that already has so much controversy over his own career in basketball. That career only started because he wanted to help out his parents. After being born on February 27, 1961, he grew up in North Carolina. He first started playing basketball when he was just 4 years old, but did admit that he absolutely hated the sport growing up until his parents showed him otherwise. Worthy once said that he kept seeing his parents struggling to keep up with college tuition for his siblings, and he wanted to help his family out as much as possible, so he played basketball. He was outstanding during his high school days, picking up a ton of headlines before eventually fielding tons of scholarship offers for him to choose from. He chose the University of North Carolina because he wanted to be closer to home with his parents, and had promised that he would continue to go to church and get to all of his classes at the school. Worthy actually led that team to a college championship after dropping 28 points in the final game, further stamping his place as a future NBA prospect, and that was definitely correct. He was drafted number 1 overall in the 1982 NBA draft after picking up numerous awards and posting incredible stat lines throughout his 3 years with UNC. It was a strange change in scenery for Worthy as he went from the superstar of North Carolina to the backup to a number of excellent Lakers superstars like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson. He was still receiving praise from places like Sports Illustrated and was actually able to score 1,000 points as a rookie, the 4th in Lakers history to do so. The Lakers won the championship in his rookie season, but he wasn't on the court due to a broken leg that he suffered right before the postseason began, causing him to miss their entire playoff run. As his career went on, fans started calling him Big Game James due to his clutch play on the court and his multiple All-Star appearances. Worthy was an NBA icon right in the middle of his career, and for all the right reasons, and for some wrong ones as well. But he had the stats to remain on his high pedestal. But just like all things in life, they have to come to an end at some point. The Lakers lost the NBA championship to the Detroit Pistons during the 1989 season, then followed that up with a first-round exit in 1990. Then they forced their way back into the finals in 1991, but yet again lost to the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan.
Magic's three-point attempt blocked. Pippen comes away with it. Chicago Bulls have won their first ever NBA championship.
By this time, the Lakers all began to decline, and Worthy just wasn't the player that he used to be. So he retired a few years later and began working for CBS and even Fox Sports News. All around, he seemed like a down-to-earth guy that didn't have any former issues off the court. But the two stories that I've mentioned earlier clearly tell a different story. There were also rumors that he was influenced by the entire Lakers team when he first entered the league. Even the superstar of the team was doing drugs and picking up prostitutes throughout the entire season. And I can only imagine what that could do to a young player like Worthy who was never into any of that. Remember the time when Magic Johnson announced to the entire world that he was HIV positive? Yeah, I'm sure that Magic and the rest of the team were having sex more than any other team in the league. And it makes that even more obvious when thinking about Worthy's prostitution story once again. Johnson's story really put a spotlight on their behavior, and it must have slowed them down a little bit. But that attention isn't the type that an NBA team really wants over their players. A number of players on the team also did serious drugs. Spencer Haywood is the biggest example of this situation because he worked his entire life to make it to the NBA only to get swallowed alive by his addiction. Haywood was the only player to spiral out of control over drugs on the Lakers, but he wasn't the only person who had done it in that locker room. While names of those players have never been released, it's not hard to believe that Worthy, Johnson, and a few other big names on that roster had taken numerous drugs in between games or practices. Their head coach, Pat Riley, also had issues of his own around that time, apparently treating the players like children while also opting into a photo shoot to land him on the cover of GQ magazine. Riley had bought into his own hype as a full-blown genius, and it had created resentment between the Lakers players and their once star head coach. These were just a few of the things going on with the Los Angeles Lakers while Worthy was on the roster, so I can only imagine the terrible influences that Worthy had around him. Some players are just more susceptible to peer pressure and things like that, but it must have been worse for him because the entire team was doing these terrible things. I'm also certain that Worthy wasn't the only person in that locker room who hired a prostitute either. He just happened to be the only person caught. Worthy was just such a fantastic basketball player that it's sad his reputation has sort of gone up and down even in retirement. His whole argument with Kevin Durant a few years back turned a lot of people the wrong way, even though he claims the whole situation was taken out of proportion. Then having terrible influences around him in Los Angeles that caused him to do drugs multiple times, and finally being caught trying to hire prostitutes when the two women ended up being undercover cops. It just doesn't get much worse than that for a professional NBA player, or any player to be honest with you. The positive for Worthy is that he was still an excellent basketball player who will forever be known for his play on the court and being a legend for this Lakers team that made the finals numerous times. Though every once in a while, it's nice to go back and realize the darker side of his career that people seem to forget about. I know I, for one, was not aware of his prostitution story until a little while ago. Imagine being a Lakers fan around that time, and you went to that game against Houston with a James Worthy jersey on, only to find out that Worthy was arrested for soliciting prostitution and that it was unknown whether or not he would be able to play that night. Thankfully, he did show up, but that definitely would have been a crazy story to tell, even for the fans who loved him. I'm sure there are many more stories that haven't reached the surface as of right now surrounding those men on the Lakers, but sooner or later, they are bound to come out, and it could change our opinion on them forever. Thanks everybody so much for watching, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Also, remember to tune into our next video for more amazing content that you aren't going to want to miss.